All rise. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina is now sitting for ceremonial purposes. The Honorable Richard L. Voorhees, Judge of the United States District Court presiding. All persons having business before this court are admonished to draw near, and it shall be heard. God save these United States and this honorable court.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. This memorial session of Superior Court is now in session. The Honorable Matt Osmond, Judge presiding. All persons having business before this court are admonished to draw near, and they shall be heard. God save the state of North Carolina and this honorable court. Please be seated and come to order.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a delight to have all of you with us. Today we gather in a ceremonial session to celebrate the life and times of Philip Summa, one of our members.
This memorial service is a time-honored tradition when the brothers and sisters of the bar pay homage to the life and times of one of their profession, of one who has shared this unique discipline that binds us together.
So today we recognize the life and legacy of those achievements as a matter of public record and for the sake of our historic and corporate memory.
I'll now recognize the president of the Mecklenburg County Bar, Mr. Kerry Davis, who will now give remarks on behalf of the 26th District Bar.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court permission to face the audience?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I am Kerry Davis. I am the president of the Mecklenburg County Bar. Today, we welcome the family, friends, and colleagues of Philip Summa. To you, we offer our sincere condolences. I will now introduce Judge Samantha Mobley, a member of our Memorials Committee, who will tell you more about the time-honored tradition of our bar.
May it please the court.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Judge Samantha Mobley, member of the Mecklenburg County Bar Memorials Committee. On behalf of the Mecklenburg County Bar, we welcome the family and friends gathered here today. I would like to thank all of you for joining us here in the courtroom or virtually. For the past 7 or so decades, our bar has convened memorial sessions of court for our recently deceased members, taking the opportunity to remember and celebrate their lives. As far as we can determine, we may be the only local bar that holds these sessions. We are proud of this tradition and the role these sessions play in preserving the history of our bar. Today, Ken Sibley and Mike Sagojevic will present a resolution honoring Philip Summa. That resolution will be presented to the court, and the filed resolution will be included in the minutes of the court and maintained with all of the preceding resolutions in a bound volume in the clerk of court's office. The resolution will also be permanently posted on the bar website, along with the preceding resolutions, with copies to be provided to the family. I will now turn this proceeding over to Ken Sibley and Mike Sagovic. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And the family and friends and colleagues of Phil Summa. Phil was born on October 1st, 1951 to Felix and Carlotta Summa in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. He grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania and graduated from Neshaminy High School in 1969, where he was the long snapper for the football team and a member of the wrestling team. He graduated from Gettysburg College with a bachelor's degree in chemistry in 1973, where he was on the wrestling team, a dorm counselor, and vice president of the Interfraternity Council. From Gettysburg, he came to North Carolina State University, where he graduated with his master's degree in chemistry in 1975. From 1975 to 1980, Phil taught chemistry and physics at Hoke High School in Rayford, North Carolina. He coached wrestling, and though he had not been a tennis player, filled a need and coached tennis as well, learning the game as he coached. He must have learned it well, as one of his athletes went on to play tennis professionally and was inducted into the North Carolina Tennis Hall of Fame. After 5 years of teaching, Phil went to Campbell Law School, served as a teaching assistant and on the law review, and graduated in 1983. Later that year, he was admitted to the North Carolina bar and began practicing law in Charlotte. He was admitted to practice before the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office in 1984. Phil practiced law in Charlotte from 1983 up until a few months before his death on April 12, 2022. He worked his way up from junior associate to partner to a founder of his own law firm. He was admitted to the U.S. Supreme Court, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, and to all state and federal courts in North Carolina. His specialty was intellectual property law, and his practice was diverse, including patent, trademark, and copyright law, and related licensing and contested matters.
Phil wrote hundreds of patent applications and negotiated them through to issue patents throughout the world. He developed expertise protecting innovations in highly technical fields, including microwave-assisted chemistry, wide bandgap semiconductors, silicon carbide light-emitting diodes, and polymer chemistry, all according to the needs of his clients. On many occasions, he traveled to the U.S. Patent Office in Arlington, Virginia, to negotiate with patent examiners. His clients sent him to Europe and to Japan to help negotiate with patent examiners and appeal panels there as well. Phil's expertise was tempered with humility and common sense. On difficult questions, he would always seek the counsel of colleagues and friends. Phil's legal career was marked by numerous acts of service, some well-known and others not. He served as a member of the NC Bar Association Board of Governors and as a chair of the NC Bar Association's IP section. In the 1980s, Phil secured from North Carolina State University the patents that formed the foundation of Cree research, one of NCSU's first successful spin-out companies under the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980. The impact of his work for NCSU and Cree continued to grow as Cree has now become Wolfspeed, and in September of 2022, Wolfspeed announced plans to build a $5 billion silicon carbide manufacturing plant in Chatham County. And perhaps more important to Phil, he was always ready to share his wisdom and expertise with newer attorneys, in a way tempered with a sense of humor. This mentor affectionately earned him the nickname of Dad. For these acts and many others, Phil was deservedly awarded the NCSU College of Physical and Mathematical Sciences Medal of Achievement in 2007 and named the Business North Carolina Magazine's Legal Elite Hall of Fame for IP in that same year. Phil served his community as well as the legal profession. He was a longtime member of Christ Covenant Church in Matthews, where he served as chairman of the diaconate in the 80s. He served as a member of the Morrison Family YMCA Board of Managers Executive Committee from 2000 to 2016, including a term as chairman, where he received the George Williams Award. He was a member of the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections from 2003 to 2007. He was a board member of the NCSU College of Sciences Foundation at NCSU from 2008 to 2016.
Phil loved the outdoors, particularly spending time with his family in Graham County and the Smoky Mountains of Western North Carolina. He enjoyed hiking with family and friends, including challenging hikes in both summer sun and winter snow. He climbed to the Shuckstack Fire Tower overlooking Fontana Lake. He climbed to the top of Mount LeConte via the Alum Cave Trail and back in one day. He hiked the challenging trail from the Grandfather Mountain parking lot to the attic window overlook, at times climbing rickety ladders and scrambling by hand up a rock crevice. He enjoyed occasional target shooting at ranges in the National Forest and was particularly adept with a vintage World War II era M1 Garand rifle. After a full day outdoors, followed by a leisurely dinner, Phil enjoyed relaxing in front of a fire with family and friends, chatting amiably about most anything. Phil was an exemplar of the best that a lawyer could be. And so, with gratitude for the life of Phil Summa and for his service to his profession and his community, we, the undersigned, respectfully request the court adjourn this day in memory and out of respect for Philip Summa, receive, stamp, file, and inscribe this resolution and memorial into the minutes of this court, with a copy to be kept in the memorials of deceased attorneys in the office of the Clerk of Superior Court of Mecklenburg County, and provide filed copies of this resolution to Phil's family. Thank you.
I just wanted to say a couple more words. I'm probably the person that coined the dad term when he was a third-year associate and I was a first-year associate at the law firm Bell Seltzer. And Phil was always a teacher. He was always taking an opportunity, whether it was teaching about patent law or about religion, about anything. He was always interested in a conversation. He was also my landlord for a while, and the one thing I'll leave you with is the one thing he ingrained in me that my current spouse fully agrees with, is that all men should have a maid. So, you know, and that was something I've lived with for 30 years ago when he was my landlord. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now the history and practice of the court in these lovely memorial proceedings, to ask if there is anyone else who would like to say a few words in regard to Phil Summa. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, please, the court. If I may have permission. All right, I have some prepared remarks. I'll take questions at the reception. Good afternoon. I'm happy to have this opportunity to say a few words in the memory of Phil Summa. I'm Bob Gleason, and for those of you who don't know me, I would refer to myself as Phil's brother-in-law. But Phil would correctly tell me that I was in fact his sister-in-law's husband, or his wife's brother-in-law. Phil simply called me the other Bob. And he would call me OB for short, and it was usually like this, OB! So that's how I was known. And that's what Phil would call me. Since the time I was married and married my wife and joined this wonderful family, I always looked to Phil as a friend. After all, Phil was from the same county in Pennsylvania where I grew up. Phil was always very welcoming to me when I joined the family and always had the biggest smile. He had a grin that just had the way of saying, I've got this. It's in the bag. Phil would tell my late mother-in-law, who was a wonderful Southern woman, that he was putting the North in North Carolina. Yet Phil, in many ways, had deeply acculturated himself in the ways of the good people of North Carolina. And as these distinguished gentlemen discussed Phil's resume earlier, he did in fact come to North Carolina to get his graduate degree at NC State. And then he spent a number of years teaching in a North Carolina public school as a public school teacher. Then when he married Mary, he came here and he was in Charlotte and put down roots. And they had this beautiful family with these wonderful children who are here today. In addition to practicing law as a patent attorney, Phil, as discussed earlier, was also someone who was a servant to his community. He was active in his church and was a founding member of Covenant Presbyterian Church. And as discussed, he served on several boards, including the YMCA and the Board of Elections. Phil Summa was a man of integrity. He was recognized as such when serving as parliamentarian at several Mecklenburg County Republican conventions. But what I remember most is that Phil once walked out of buying a car at a dealership when at the time of signing the paperwork, Phil called out the fact that the notary was not present at the time that he was supposed to sign the paperwork. And he asked about that, and he was told that the notary would notarize the paperwork later. Phil walked out of the deal. Phil referred to that experience as a bad dealer experience. So if you're crooked in small things, you're likely crooked in large things. Phil often said that all you need to know in life is chemistry and the Bible. And Phil was well versed in both. Phil could discuss arcane points of theology, chemical reactions, and Panthers football, all in the same conversation. He was an avid reader, and he enjoyed reading history, theology, the works of Carl Hiaasen. He enjoyed, for example, Skinny Dip and some of those other books that he wrote. Phil had a very keen interest in and an understanding of economic principles. And as most of you know, Phil had a really good sense of humor, and he had many pet expressions. These included, how hard can it be? Pigs is pigs. If you know what you're doing, you're a lawyer, be a lawyer. And then there were the expressions from his favorite films and TV shows. Hello, McFly. It's Pat. And from Seinfeld, I slipped one past the goalie. Phil was the biggest Saturday Night Live fan I have ever met. Phil would watch SNL and somehow still make it to services on Sunday. Phil must have watched every episode since 1975. And Phil was fond of applying SNL skits as analogies to matters of patent law. One such skit was Land Shark. Somehow, Phil would apply the skit to make a legal point. And if for some reason you have managed to live your life during the last 48 years and never saw the skit, Phil would explain the skit to you. And he would say, you see, Chevy Chase, he's dressed up like a shark, and he rings the bell to an apartment. The person inside, who's inside, asks, who's it? And who's there? And Chevy then says, Candy Graham. The person inside then opens the door and gets eaten. Phil would then explain how this applied to the legal issue at hand. So whether it was Samurai Hotel, the Coneheads, or Bassomatic, it had a legal or life application. Phil's love language was gift giving. He would always bring back small gifts when he traveled. Phil would like to stop during his travels at local mom and pop restaurants, old bookshops, and offbeat places like the Cheese Barn, located somewhere in Ohio. He was particularly fond of little gadgets that he would call gizmos. Phil would bring gifts when he came to our house for dinner and thoughtful gifts for our children when he traveled. He would always offer me a drink when I would come over for dinner, oftentimes what Phil would refer to as a Protestant carbohydrate beverage. Phil would very much appreciate it also when you would reciprocate and bring gifts of food or drink to dinner. What I most appreciate about Phil is how good he was to my children. Unfortunately, my service in the United States Army Reserve took me away from my family far too much. Phil was often there to take my children and his children hiking. Each hiking trip began with the obligatory early morning stop at the IHOP to carbo load for the day's strenuous outing. Except one time, much to my third son's horror, when the breakfast stop was at the Waffle House. You see, growing up the son of two prosecutors, you hear things about cases. There were also the boys' weekends where Phil took my boys to the mountain house for a weekend of hiking and handmade from scratch pasta dinners. It was Phil's opportunity to express his Italian heritage. I very much appreciated how good he was to my boys. My fondest memories of Phil were those rare occasions when I could go with our families to Phil and Mary's mountain house. There were the long hikes on the Appalachian Trail in Graham County, trips to Fontana Dam and the Great Smoky Mountains, and shooting rifles and pistols at the range. The day's activities were followed by one of Mary's delicious dinners, a glass of fine wine, and on a few occasions, a finger or two of Glenfiddich. The evenings always concluded with reading books near the fireplace. All of us here today have our memories of Phil. He touched all of our lives in some way. He was taken much too soon, but he lives on in our memories. And I think we need to hold on to the good memories, and we need to emulate Phil's good qualities, and in doing so, honor his memory. I know Phil is at peace with the Lord, and I'm sure that he's looking upon us today with that big smile of his that seemed to say, I've got this. It's in the bag.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to make any remarks at this point? So I don't see any hands. Yes, sir. I see a gentleman who rise to the occasion.
May I approach?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Parsons, and I want to thank Phil's family for the opportunity to speak today. It's a real privilege. My ambition today is to provide a frame of the painting that was Phil Summa's life. It's a picture of noble piety. When I say piety, I mean something like this. He saw himself as a creature, not a creator. He knew his place in a created order involved worship. For Phil, every act, all his tasks, even his work, was an act of worship. He saw himself as subordinate, not sovereign. Phil acknowledged he was not the ultimate nor final authority. He saw himself as sinner, not savior, as redeemed, not redeemer. Phil's piety was on display, not in bold, self-aggrandizing proclamations, but rather in quiet obedience and genuine devotion, doing his duty to God, family, country, and profession. This informed every corner of Phil's life. Pervasive and comprehensive was his devotion. Its consequence was nobility. Piety and nobility was cause and effect, not its reverse. As to Phil's nobility, one's first encounter with Phil Summa presented a conventional and conservative man, not given to flash or pretension. All true, but incomplete. Phil Summa was noble because he was pious. He was a Christian, faithful to live a life of worshipful obedience, devout, but without condescension. He was a family man. And it's easy to say a man loves his family, but I wish you could have seen, many of you did, wish you could have seen the ways in which Phil devoted himself to his wife and children, placing their needs before his wants. Of course, he loved them, and it was displayed in the twinkle, sometimes a tear, when he would speak of them. But more significantly, more than the sentiment, his love was on display as he provided them with all the things good fathers give to their family, spiritual and material. Phil's professional life was characterized by nobility. He was excellent at what he did. He was a gentleman when he did it, and he was well-mannered at all times. There was universal agreement among Phil's peers that he was among the best at what he did. What he did is he called his practice the revenge of the nerds. I'm not making this up. And Phil liked to collect pens, so I used to always ask him, well, where's the pocket protector, Phil? He did it with a gentle, manly manner. Always a smile, courteous and cheerful. It is said that manners are the actions of the golden rule, and that was Phil's way. Phil was also a noble companion. He was generous, kind, loyal, reliable, steady, all of these things that made him a noble companion. But Phil was also joyful and took delight in giving himself, his time, and often goods to others. He did enjoy giving gifts. And I know many of you were recipients of some of those gifts, both material and otherwise. He took joy in giving what he had to others because he saw himself as a steward of everything he had, which was really God's. And Phil would often make that point, that what he had, his talents, his wealth, his law practice, whatever it was that he had, came from a good and gracious hand. In all of these ways, Phil Summa was a great man, extraordinary and exceptional. So we're properly saddened at his passing because there's been a real loss. And this sadness should serve to remind us that our loss was because of God's good gift. Allow it to direct you to the giver, and more specifically, the gift of his son who lived forcefully in Phil Summa. Let the memory of Phil Summa prompt you to follow him as he followed Christ. Let his grandchildren about this man be informed and told of his noble piety, that they're enriched in the ways that we have been by his life. Thank God for Phil Summa and for that gift, above all else, that he was to all of us.
Yes, sir.
Please, Lord.
P.K. Chesterton, on the passing of a family member, once said these words which are aptly remembered in connection with Phil Summa. For real strength, I don't like the word comfort. For real peace, no human words are much good, except perhaps some of the unfathomable, unintelligible, unconquerable epigrams of the Bible. One such text was, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of one of his saints. Chesterton concluded, for his death awoke in one a passionate sense of the value of his life, so that even his death was a thing of incalculable value and mysterious sweetness. It is awful, tragic, desolating, desperately hard to bear, but still precious. Chesterton knew, as we know about Phil, that his death was beautiful. The reason that it did not seem beautiful in the moment was that we do not see it now. What we see is his absence. But his death is not his absence, but his presence somewhere else. Phil's family, friends, and bar colleagues can take comfort in the hope that he is present somewhere else. But we can also draw strength and inspiration from his presence with us in our individual and collective memories of him. This is the great value of these bar memorial services. On the surface, there were differences between Phil Summa and me. Phil earned a master's degree in and taught chemistry. I was a history major. When Phil would appear in front of me at a hearing, I was as scientifically ignorant as I looked. I think he always knew that he could never be too elementary in his PowerPoint presentations. He earned a master's degree from NC State. My undergraduate degree came from Clemson. He was a lawyer married into a family of lawyers, several of whose children became lawyers. My dad was a corrugated box salesman. We had no lawyers in our family tree, and none of my 5 children found their way into the law, although some became quite familiar with it in their youthful indiscretion. He was reformed in his Christian faith, and I'm a Catholic. But our shared passions united us, passions for faith, family, professional excellence, what Judge Brent McKnight once referred to as accuracy in the law's application and excellence in its expression. Phil was a lawyer's lawyer, careful, strategic, winsome, and possessed of the highest ethics. He was a man who made commitments and kept them, especially as relevant here to his colleagues, the court, and his clients. He had a great smile that blessed the adversarial process of which he was a part. He was an enthusiastic mentor to younger lawyers and a steady influence on his peers. He won a lot and was gracious in victory. He lost some and never lost his professional demeanor. His work was important, but he lived for his family. His wife, children, and in-laws held him in the highest and most affectionate esteem. And that might be Phil's greatest legacy. This memorial service calls to our collective mind these individual characteristics that make Phil Summa a lawyer worthy of emulation. He epitomizes the type of lawyer the bar cherishes. One might say he reflects the Summa, or the best, the highest our bar has to offer. And so it is an honor to be here today, a member of a bar which honors its own, and does so today of a man worthy of our respect.
Thank you, Judge Conrad. Would there be anyone else who would like to make a remark here? Yes, I see a hand.
May it please the court.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Becky Harris-Samowich. Excuse me, I'm cold. I was Phil's associate for over 6 years, and we've heard a wonderful telling and accounting of the man that he was and the incredible career that he had. But above all else, Phil was a teacher. He was always a teacher. He was literally a teacher before going to law school, and he never quite shook that. His favorite pen was his red pen, and he would love to eviscerate anything you wrote. In the hands of anyone else, that would be scathing. But Phil always managed to do that with kindness, because you knew every comment he made was genuinely aimed at making you a better lawyer. I am beyond grateful for the time that I had learning from Phil, being able to start my career under a man who had such a command of patentese, as we like to call the language of drafting patent claims. It's extremely nerdy, and he could draft an incredibly ornate and descriptive claim out of seemingly thin air. I have never seen anyone able to do it like him. I will never be able to do it like him. But I know that I am the lawyer I am because of him. In addition to all that he taught me career-wise, I truly admire and respect how much he loved his family. We've heard so much about that, but every day at lunches, you guys were what he talked about. He was so proud of his children, literally everything you guys accomplished, every struggle, every joy. We talked about it over lunch. We know all of your details. But the pride and love he had for his children and his wife, that was an incredibly high standard. He loved to tell stories about the incredible boss of a woman that she was in heels pregnant at the Republican National Convention. And as a result, he thought pregnant women could do anything. Having been a pregnant associate for him multiple times, that was a very high bar. So no, thank you. But Phil was truly a wonderful man, as we've heard. But he took being a teacher and a mentor seriously to heart. That's what he prioritized. It wasn't just his career, but passing it on to the next generation. And so on behalf of all of his associates and everyone who's had the benefit of learning from him, just thank you for sharing him with us.
Thank you very much. And would there be anyone else? So I don't see another hand. Let me take this point to introduce the other federal judges who are with us. You've heard from Judge Bob Conrad and Judge Frank Whitney, and Judge Bell are seated in the jury box. So, and aside from myself, in that regard, let me say this, that I would endorse every remark made in favor of our lovely honoree today, because they're right on point. And I've been fortunate enough to know members of the family, beginning probably mostly with an acquaintance with Bob Potter, after whom we have named one of our distinguished and traditional courtrooms in the Jonas building that you probably entered as you came in to the building. But the Bob Potter courtroom bears his portrait traditionally, and we're delighted to have that association and the other acquaintances, including particularly Mary Summa, who is with us with her family today. Now let me also announce that you may expect a reception to be held on the 6th floor balcony or terrace of this building, a reception and refreshments. So the 6th floor is where that is located. It's on the side of the building that faces the Truist Field ballpark, and on farther the Bank of America Stadium. And there's a nice view there, and you can enjoy, and you'll appreciate that as you enjoy the refreshments and associating with those who are present. So you simply take the elevator that you came up on and go down 2 floors we're on 8 now, we go down to number 6, and you're there, and you'll see others headed toward the balcony. Now then, the court orders that the comments presented at this hour be spread upon the minutes of this court and filed with copies presented to the family of our departed brother at the bar.
And on behalf of the judges of the Mecklenburg County Superior Court, this court orders that the comments at this hour be spread upon the minutes of this state court and filed with the clerk of court for Mecklenburg County.
Court orders that the U.S. Marshal adjourn court of this memorial session in memory and out of respect of Mr. Philip Summa. And I say fare thee well, colleague Summa, and Godspeed.
All rise. Oh, yes, oh, yes. Memorial session of the United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina, adjourned in memory of, out of respect for, Philip Summa.
Sheriff, please adjourn this court in honor and memory of Mr. Philip Summa.
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. This joint session of federal and state court is adjourned in the memory of and out of respect for Mr. Philip Summa. Thank you.
So head downstairs.
Mhm.